I'll listen later. I believe to my core that everybody has the potential to be creative, whatever form that creativity takes, and that to encourage such development is a noble thing. The thesis of this book is that there are many blocks to creativity, but there are active steps we can take to protect the creative process. So Alberto's question was, how do you see creativity playing a role in your work, and what steps do you think can enhance your creativity? What do you think, Karen? You have thoughts, I can tell.
Maybe I'll turn off the webinar so you can't, the cam, so you can't see my face. First of all, I think it's interesting. He's interesting from a couple of perspectives, coming from an engineering background, starting trying to be an animator, and then being an engineer, and then trying to create this company. But I do think that at least where we are in our world at ICI and SCISD, we have to be creative because we are most of us are on these grant-funded programs, and they're always different, and we have to be visionary, kind of anticipating where the customer, where the stakeholders are, and how to deliver our services. So I think that I don't find us, at least in our work, to be bound by a lot of norms. I think that most of us are free to exert that creativity.
That's interesting. Well, first of all, yes, I think this is kind of the main thesis of the book. It's about how to enhance creativity. I do think creativity is very important. I agree with you. It's very important for what we do because, yes, we need to be visionary. We need to anticipate what's the next step and push forward with innovative ways of creating a more inclusive environment in work, life, school, education, etc. Sometimes I feel a little bit frustrated because then when it comes to develop ideas and getting funding for implementing those ideas, we have a constraint of getting only certain grants, like not getting in terms of being successful in certain grants. It's just like the RFPs require us sometimes to do work that is not really our core mission or what I would like to do, but I have to do that in order to pay my salary, and so sometimes I feel like, why are we doing this? It's not really what is going to advance much.
I was actually thinking that one aspect of creativity is, one thing that requires creativity is figuring out how to meld your goals with what the RFP asks for and figure out a way to make the available resources work toward our vision.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So creativity and flexibility are closely connected with each other.
Yeah. That is one of the real challenges. It's hard to really do things we don't always get to pursue the topics we want to in the linear fashion we would like to because we're pulled, maybe not completely off track, but off a little bit one direction or another by what we are and are not funded to do.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think that the pace of the work sometimes doesn't allow for the length of time I'd like to give to it to be truly creative, or to even think about how to how to pursue a passion that is in alignment with our organizational goals. So we do have the constraint because we have to get the money in to support what we want. At the same point, sometimes that's difficult, and I think as you just said, Alberto, because it just may not quite fit. But my own personal frustration is sometimes I would just love to have 2 days just to read and think and not worry about email or responding to a phone call or missing, and just that clear thought to really put some ideas in place.
I think along those lines, sometimes we get really creative in grants, and then we get really frustrated or stuck in kind of a tunnel of trying to figure out how to implement that idea we had that sounded really exciting, and then you can't make it happen. For example, I think we wrote a grant recently about an innovation exchange and these affinity groups, and then the technology actually isn't there to do it really. So then you get frustrated and, okay, well, we had this good idea, now how do we, like Karen said, within the timeline we have to work in, come up with something that looks something like that. I think we feel bound by what technology does and bound by sometimes the political structure of the work that we do, being careful all the time. So I think that I wish sometimes I was in a field where I was making a movie like Toy Story, where you can really just be kind of out there and creative and not really, bound by all those kind of constraints.
And yet, these guys dealt with the same stuff.
Exactly.
But they wanted to make a movie, but they went off into selling hardware and software development and all this other stuff on the way. So I don't know.
Yeah, because they had no idea how to get there, and what was interesting too, and I think illuminating is that whole venture capital world. So you have, once again, they had the same thing, Jen. You're absolutely right, because they had this idea, but then they had to try to find the venture capitalists, which were only going to fund something that was not necessarily in their wheelhouse. Not all of us around the corner are going to find a Steve Jobs. So it's interesting to think that way as well.
What I found most interesting in the entire 3 chapters was how mindful they were about fostering creativity. And I think that you guys bringing this book to the table, it really makes me think about that, because as managers or as employees or whatever, I don't think that that's a priority at the ICI always.
Yeah.
Can you give a couple?
I think one.
Go ahead, Karen.
And I know that when we speak up at these things, I hope that what we say is sort of confidential and in the spirit of congeniality. I think that what would really be helpful as an organization is to get as many of us in the room, virtually or in spot, to talk about where do we want this organization to go and to be. And I think having that really rich discussion, first of all, and collectivism about what do we want it to be could be really helpful. And then we talk about, because to me that is we're helping to create our future, and then the mechanisms of how to get there.
I'm going to say, actually, we have about twice a year, the state systems team has a retreat. And I think that's really helpful. We take a couple days to sort of meet as a large group, as smaller groups, and talk about, but it's a chance to sort of step back and say, get away from the, I got to edit that brief and then go to that meeting and then, get on Jeff's back about that website and then plan this trip. And there's just a lot of nuts and bolts day-to-day work. And the retreat is a time that everybody schedules. There's a couple days to think a bit more about the big picture and say, oh, well, look, I've got this model and you've got that model, and look, they sort of combine this way, and maybe this could be part of a grander vision of community supports, and maybe we could go in this big direction with it. And those are the kind of things, like just like you were saying, Karen, having a couple days to actually sit and think about that stuff individually and collectively is something that we tend to lack because there's just always the next to do. But being able to do that as a larger organization, I think, would be interesting too.
Well, I think it sets the tone. You know, I'm struck by Ed's comment in the last chapter, the third chapter, about they have a successful product. So Toy Story is very successful. He assumed because the people that he was sitting and talking with were fine, and then he realized that that whole unit of production people were, you know, were miserable.
Yeah.
And the lessons learned from that. So, you know, I'm not. I just think that's very important. That it's important for, you know, every voice to be heard, and you know, just recognize that importance and bringing people together. And I know that's something that the Morale Committee does, but I think it needs to be more of an organization-wide effort, intentional about where we're going as an organization. Because I think that's where you really get the creative ideas. You get people just bouncing ideas off of one another, and some of them may not go anywhere, but it's just that experience of just doing that, and, which I think is very uplifting and important.
I think so too, and that also shows staff that their creative thinking is valued. You know, that because that's a substantial commitment of money and time to do something like that. You know, to block out a half day or full day retreat.
Right.
And I totally agree, Karen, with what you said in terms of thinking about, you know, the research we do and what kind of research questions we ask. Often I feel like what happens, there's a grant and we scramble to at the last minute to develop a proposal, and we are in emergency mode. And I wish we were more thoughtful in over the year without having the pressure of a grant, thinking about what is it the next step? What is it really the most important thing we should focus as an organization? And then when a grant comes, we try to apply those goals and using creativity, like Jen, you said, trying to bend, you know, getting a compromise. But my feeling is that often what happens is that someone comes up with some ideas and we go for it, and we invest a lot of time, and I feel like there could be a better way of handling that.
No, I think the other end of the grants is the other place we struggle too. Grants just kind of peter out. You know, we don't really have always a clear end point. You know, so I'm also was struck by the chapter that Karen's talking about where, you know, they finish the movie and then they could reflect on what happened with the movie. I don't think we ever ever take the time, at least my team maybe, to finish a project and then reflect on what happened. You know, maybe we reflect on a conference here and there, but maybe that's the fact that most of our projects just keep going on and on and on. But we don't really take the time to go back and say, well, okay, what worked this year? What didn't work? How did it work? What, you know, or what can we do better or differently?
By the time it ends, there's another 2-3 more projects.
Exactly. So it's like everything's on top of each other, versus, you know, there's a singular product out there. Although we do produce products, you know, we do have websites and books and briefs and conferences. But do we look at them and really take the time to see who was involved, how did it work, who felt good about it, who you know, what we can do? I don't see that happening naturally.
And it is.
There's something else too that I think we need to maybe figure out how to do better, and that is the whole celebration of the success. It's not only the success when you get a grant, it's sort of, as you end the project, even if it's refunded. These things I think are important, and quality improvement. My background is in management, and Deming has always been my hero. And when you read the Toyota story, I mean, that's in every management text about that every individual has the opportunity, at least what happened in Toyota, to pull the cord, to basically say there's something about this product that is deficient, and we have to talk about it and redo it, and that empowerment of the individuals. The whole issue of quality improvement, I think, just gets lost in the quality assurance, which are two very, very different things. Quality improvement brings in creativity. Quality assurance is just following the practice. And we don't use those terms at ICI, but I do think quality comes from creativity and looking back, and also looking forward. So,
I was going to say that true, we have a lot of pressure, and there's never time to do everything. And in fairness, in the book, I'm not sure if it is in these 3 chapters or later, but at some point, Ed talks about when they were making Toy Story, and they were actually working nonstop, 7 days a week, 10 or 12 hours a day. People wouldn't see their families for a very long time. So there's also another side of the story that it's tough. But I was wondering if you don't mind if I switch to another question, and if people have other topics that want to talk, but I was interested to hear. I was impressed when at some point Ed was talking about when he hired his first collaborator who had a better curriculum and was better than Ed himself, and he thought, hey, this guy could actually take my job if I hire this guy. Nevertheless, he went ahead and hired that guy, and his philosophy was always be, always trust the process and think about the good of what you want to achieve. So if another person seems better than you, hire that person. It might bring something good to the company. And it speaks about achieving individual goals versus achieving organizational goals, team goals. And I wonder what people thought about that. I like to think that achieving team goals and organizational goals is a better strategy rather than pursuing your individual career. And like your individual career will be enhanced by pursuing the organization's goals. But everything around us pushes the other way, because you should publish more. You should be the first author more. So I wonder if people had any thoughts about this issue or other issues.
Ed's comment about, I'm just going to respond to the first thing, his comment about hiring someone who could take his job. That's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that from other people. I've heard that in the literature. And I think that also shows a confidence, and also, not fear about, you have to bring in talent, and that's the most important thing, and talent that is going to enhance your organization. But Alberto, I think it goes back to even what the first question was, that ideally, if you had a perfect organization, that your individual goals would match up with your team goals and your organization goals. I think sometimes when you see people leaving organizations is because they no longer see themselves in the mission or feel that they're self-satisfied with the work. But I was just in another meeting this morning. We were talking about the same thing. We're talking about people's work, and I think our question was, well, do their skills really match up with the work? Is this something that they really wanted to do? And let's flip the coin. Let's not look at the task right now. Let's look at the person first and ask them, what do you really want to do? And because we want to make sure that people are happy and feeling productive. But we're all different. So I think we all have different external pressures that are built on us that may not be congruent with where we want to be or how we want to live our life. And that competitiveness and what we have to do in our processes, publishing, disseminating, whatever it may be, sometimes is not necessarily what we want to do, and that's that conflict.
I
will
feel like,
go ahead, Jen, sorry.
at the risk of making it overly personal, I feel like I struggle with maybe too much of a tendency to put the group ahead of my own personal career goals. I don't have that much, published academic work, or like if you look at my individual track record as someone in this line of work, I'm always moving on to the next project and never writing the article that would get me that first authorship that would enhance my CV. Because I'm moving on to the next brief or presentation or whatever behooves the project or the team. So I think there's a need to balance that, yeah. And it can go too far in either direction. What were you going to say, Molly? I thought that was Molly.
Molly, you're on mute.
Oh.
Oh, it looks like people froze.
Oh no.
Connecting to audio.
Oh.
Oh no.
Connected to audio.
Oh.
Let's give it a minute and see if it comes back.
Karen is back. We can hear you.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, we lost the connection for a little bit. Molly, can you hear us now? Okay, great. Did you two hear what Jen was saying before the connection was lost?
Yes.
Okay. Molly, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that I think the individual and the whole are really important, absolutely. But this organization, compared to other organizations that I've worked for, is actually such a positive one. USEDS in general, at least for me, everybody's trying to help people. And so I think a lot of people do put the greater cause first rather than themselves. And I think that's, to me, it may not, we may not use that to the fullest potential to spark creativity and really celebrate the best we can, but we do have a lot of people committed to a really cool cause. And I just I reflect on that every once in a while, because when I meet people from other USEDs, I realize I could work there, and I like the people, and I like what they're about, and I just know from, I've worked in education and academia, and private corporations, and this is just a really nice place to be.
Yeah, I feel like we do put the emphasis on the whole a lot more than a lot of people in academia, in higher education, are more individually focused. I think you see in more academic programs more of like people, I'm the PI, and so my name has to be first on everything, even if you did all the work, and that kind of dynamic, which doesn't happen nearly as much here. Plus, we have less of that, like you have to bring in money to keep your individual job. If I apply for a grant and it doesn't come through and Karen gets something, then she'll bring me into her project. Not necessarily across, it's a little less so across teams, but within teams at least. as long as the state systems team has enough money, it's okay if I personally didn't bring it in.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that from what I can tell, I do think that's practiced pretty much across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Really emphasizing how to keep keep our staff going, and the thought is, yeah, we all try to bring in that money, but it's for the greater good rather than just one particular person. So there is that, and I know people really really consider that.
Mm-hmm.
By this time of the year is always a little bit tense, as we get new things, and then people get moved around, or we lose some things, and then as it falls into place, people are taken care of and covered.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with Karen what you said before, that about Ed being like showing self-confidence by choosing to hire someone who is better than him, which came across, and I was impressed also when he was interviewed by Lucasfilm, and they asked him to name other candidates that would be good for that job position. And he actually listed a number of people that he knew that could be good for that job at his own risk.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he was actually hired because he was the only one so candid to show that candor and fairness. There
And
was
confidence.
confidence,
Absolutely.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So
I really like that part too.
it does pay off sometime to be well intentioned, and not playing games. And I like that.
Mhm.
But it's tough sometimes.
Especially just
It's also interesting too to just the dynamics between him and Steve Jobs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Ed strikes me as being someone that would be pretty much a real people oriented, and we've all heard about Steve Jobs and how difficult he can be, really really creative and have this vision, but then be someone that's very difficult to work for. So there's that balance too.
Mhm.
So how, if we were, this may have been one of your questions, I did read them, but I guess would our coworkers, for instance, or maybe I should just say generally at ICI, if we brought up this need to really spend more time in creative thought, not only in teams but across teams, and how could we communicate the value of that message?
I personally wanted to hand this book to a few people.
who will remain unnamed.
Yes, because it's being recorded.
Well, the idea that Jen, you were referring to about the state system retreat, I think it might be a way to bring people about and to think more. So the bottom line would be to propose and ask to have like a ICI is the wide retreat, and to talk about where we want to go, what people think, and just have a space for people to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It might be an interesting junction at which to do it, because I was at the forum about the ICI director hiring
Mhm.
the other day, and it came up the fact that we've been so much in transition with the founding of the school and moving offices, and now hiring a new director, like the need to sort of manage that change process and be sort of checking in with people and making sure that everyone is, I don't know. There was some discussion around the need to be maybe a little more mindful of that process and deliberately addressing that with the staff. And I wonder if that could also be folded into. It would be a good time to be talking about our vision, because I think some people feel like the vision is threatened by the combination of bringing in a new director who might not have Bill's background and the shifting of some focus and resources over to the SIGISD, which, while a fabulous organization, has a fairly different mission from the ICI. So where does the ICI fall in this? And what is our vision moving forward? And yet there are also opportunities. I mean, there are, in the sort of state systems transformation kind of stuff we do, there's some federal movement that creates huge opportunities to get involved in some real systems change too.
Yeah, I sort of, when we have time to reflect, sometimes think about that, Jen. You know, our work, almost all of us, are working with either internal or external systems or individuals to help them with change, and we're really in it. I mean, I think as an organization, you can have a greater change than having a new executive director, especially after Bill has been here since this is his baby, and this is his imprint.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think, I'm going to bring something up, Molly. Do you remember with the learning community, we had tried at one point this was for the learning community, to have off-site staff all come in at the same time?
I remember that. It was a great event.
Well, and we wanted, I mean, that was just even for the learning community, and we had some pushback because of resources. But, I think that, I agree with you. I think now is a time that would be really important to bring people together and have a conversation off-site and people on-site about where are we going. And, my feeling is that I don't know who is going to be our executive director, and I don't think any of us do, but, I do believe that we're the ones who have the knowledge. That's only one person, and that we can help that executive director come in if we're very clear about where we think we should be going. I think it would be a great service to a new person coming in.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because that was another thing that came up the other day, was the idea that maybe this new director needs to be more of a manager, because we have so many people who do have the vision. It's very different from when Bill took on the role as sort of the visionary at the head. Now we have a lot of people in fairly senior positions who all have a sense of direction and mission. And maybe just somebody to shepherd all that is what we need.
That could be. I mean, that could be. I mean, I don't know. But I do think that I do think that that creativity is not, getting back to the book, is not only what we bring individually, but what we can bring collectively, and any opportunity that we have to share that. I think it would be very powerful. And I've seen organizations that have shut down for a day and have had as many employees as we have just gather together and really have it. It doesn't even have to be a plan. It could just be, facilitated discussion about, where we are, what we think we should do, what have we learned, how can we harness that going forward. I just think it'd be very dynamic and exciting, and also uplifting. I think we have been through a lot of change, and I think it's some people are having a hard time, and now this other one on top of it, and just collectively coming together could be helpful.
Yeah, and there's really something to be said for the motivation that comes out of regrouping and rethinking the big picture and what that does for people's productivity and innovation, I think.
And
There's
but-
a value to it. I know it costs a lot, but there's definitely a value added.
I agree. Many companies do that. Some companies, I think Zappos took their people to the Hawaii, but I don't think we can afford to do that.
That would be nice.
But at the end of this book, they Ed also is describing. I don't know if people have already read the full book, but he is describing actually a similar event because despite the success they had, they did want to stop and think about. There were issues with management, and they stopped a few days, and it describes pretty well the process, which is very similar for with the learning event that Karen you were describing.
Well, they often say that when you're having some issues is when you really need to communicate more often. And I do think our leaders have really tried in this process. I remember the move, all of those moving newsletters that we had every day, just the updates, and now trying to gather the input. But there is that face-to-face momentum, and I would like more of that, frankly. And it's not even being a telecommuter. When I was even there more often, I just am very eager to hear more about other people's work, and have the opportunity to work more with people that I don't, and just to see what we can create together, which I think would be fascinating.
And I can't agree more with you, Karen. And just it's also included in the book when Steve Jobs was negotiating with Ed the acquisition, and the questions that Steve Jobs had were, what do you want? Where are you heading? What are your long-term goals? And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I would be curious, we don't have a lot of time left, and we need to talk also about the logistics, how often to meet, and how many pages per read, and so forth. But I was curious, maybe we can talk next time. Steve Jobs had this idea of insanely great products. And I was wondering, like here, what are our insanely great products? And do we put enough emphasis on that idea, on that concept? But maybe we should talk about the logistics. What do you think, Anya?
Yeah, let's think about insanely great products for next time.
Okay.
Let's pick out the discussion for next time, thinking about do we already make any insanely great products here, and if not, what insanely great products would we like to see made?
I think we do make insanely products, but we can do more.
So in terms of logistics, Alberto and I were thinking we could meet every 3 weeks or so. Does that seem okay to you all?
But we are open to other
open to other
ideas. I mean, what's the best?
And then about 3 chapters each. Have you sort of factored out how many chapters you want us to read for the next one?
Yeah. So Alberto has planned out a tentative schedule where we'd be reading about 80 pages for each meeting, which is similar to what we had this time, right?
Yeah.
And if the every 3 weeks schedule sounds good to people, then that would mean that our next meeting would be on Election Day, Tuesday, November 8th. Do people like the idea of meeting on Election Day, or do we want to choose a different day?
And we can also change the day of the week. We start with Tuesday, but is Tuesdays okay, or
Tuesdays
people
are
prefer
good for me.
another day?
I like Tuesdays. What about the rest of you? Karen likes.
I think all of our schedules just depend upon what month it is. Generally, Tuesday is a good day.
What about for you, Molly?
That works. I mean, I think we're probably better just scheduling them one at a time, if that's okay with people, or do people want to get a calendar out? Because I think I have a lot of conferences and stuff coming up that it will be hard to predict.
That's fine to just schedule the next one every time we meet.
If that's okay.
That's fine.
It's such a small group so far. I mean, a fabulous
Yeah.
group, but not.
Hopefully-
We don't have to juggle 20 people's schedules. We'll
Right.
pick something that works for the 5 of us, and then
Right.
just let other people come if they can make it.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So
The
t-
eighth-
And thank you for doing this, by the way. It's much appreciated.
of course, it was Alberto's idea.
But
Thank you, Alberto.
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for your interest. And so next time would be Tuesday, the 8th. Is that
Tuesday,
correct?
November 8th. Yep. And so for that, we will read chapters 4 through 7, which is 79 pages of reading. So chapters
Okay.
4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay.
Good.
Great.
All right. Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. See you next week.
Thank you. Take care.